Hi, all. I'm Cullen Haynes, and welcome to Lawyer Lending Live. My next guest is, I'm very happy to say, a dear friend of mine and an absolute legend in the property industry. Over 10 years at CBA before founding the very incredible Mayfield property buyers. Can you please make very welcome my dear friend, Mr. John Carew? How are you, John? Great to have you on Lawyer Lending Live, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Cullen. Great to be here.
Now, mate, I just wanted to talk. What is happening in your circle of influence, mate, to start us off? What is going on?
Yeah, I guess, look, it's been a busy year I think, a busy start to 2023 for most people in my sort of circle of influence, family, friends, etc. The property market, everyone loves talking about real estate, as you know.
Of course,
You
of
can't
course.
go anywhere without being hit up about it, of what's it doing, the market, this, that, and the other. So, look, it's been
Especially Uncle Bob at the barbecue. Uncle Bob always has some great
Uncle
tips,
Bob's always
even
there. Yep. Yeah, Uncle Bob
though he
has
doesn't own a mortgage
got a
or a
lot to
property,
answer for. Yeah, Uncle Bob's got a lot to answer for. But look, it's obviously been a busy start to the year. The market's probably defied maybe what a lot of the experts were predicting. We might touch on that a little later. But yeah, it's been busy. There's a lot of buyers out and about, and like always, you're juggling work, family, life, friends, and trying to keep things in balance somewhat as well.
And you do it so well, mate. We were on the phone earlier. You were at a property with some of my clients looking at a gorgeous property that may be a little bit of competition, but that's where you give the edge. And case in point, a lot of my clients watching are legal professionals, and we all know lawyers and real estate agents don't mix at the best of times. Can you
Yeah,
tell us the difference between not to denigrate real estate agents, because I've got many as friends, but
not
I
at
guess the
all.
huckster real estate agent versus a buyer's agent, my friend? What is the inherent difference?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question and good for people to understand. Look, essentially a buyer's agent is employed independently for and exclusively to work on behalf of the buyer or buyers. So that's
Yes,
the first delineation where, look, sales agents are employed by their vendors to maximize the sale price of their asset and
of
obviously
course.
give them a great experience and process all the way through. From a buyer's agent point of view, a good buyer's agent is employed to advise, guide, and steer a home buyer or investor, a young family, a downsizer, whoever that may be, steer them safely and securely all the way through to home ownership. There's different reasons why people would engage a buyer's agent. Some people are looking to simply to de-risk the process. Others have absolutely no time. Others actually aren't sure where they want to be, or maybe they can't agree on it with their partner. So there's lots of different reasons, but essentially a buyer's agent is employed by the buyer for the buyer to sort of find and secure them the best possible option in the marketplace at that point in time.
Makes sense. And throwing it out there, because this is the first question when I explain, and you said it so succinctly, I'll explain that to a lawyer or a barrister, especially, and they'll go, Cullen, how can I know that this person has my best interest in heart, where most of the agents out there get paid a commission based on the price of the property? How do you mitigate that as a buyer's agent? And it's a very good question, I think.
Yeah, look, I guess you've got to be really careful. The whole real estate industry probably does have a few, I guess, tarnishes if you like, in terms of conflicts of interest. And
Yes.
that's been well reported in Four Corners recently and broadly through the media for many, many years. So I think as a buyer's agent, if you're employing someone, you want to know that they're only working for you. And the way we, really sort of try and highlight that is we do everything at a fixed price.
Good.
I think, buyer's agents that do have a percentage-based model, I think a lot of potential clients of theirs inherently do think, well, are they trying to push me harder to make more money? So in terms of our agencies, and not just ours, but a number of well-respected and regarded colleagues right across the country have adopted that model. And I think that's a better way of showing intent and sort of commitment to a buyer that, look, just because you spend a little bit more doesn't mean you're going to be charged more from us.
No, it's a good point. It's a good point. And in your eye, what do you find are the key factors or key benefits that people come to you for that you're able to to get rather than doing, oh, I'll do it myself. I hear that all the time when I get a
Yeah.
pre-approval for someone. I'll do it myself. And I go, okay, for 3 months, try it yourself. Then at the 3-month mark, let's reassess. Because, it's obviously a certain type of client, but time poor individuals may find the benefits that you're about to speak of very compelling.
Yeah, look, I think look, a lot of people do go down that path first. There's no doubt, So as a buyer's agent, when you're pitching for business and trying to articulate your value, you may in fact be pitching against a number of other buyers agents. However, you're always pitching against them, looking at doing it themselves, and they've got to be able to see value incrementally above what they might need to invest with you to make that happen. But look, for a lot of clients, there's a lot of different reasons, but a lot of them need to have a journey to realize what a pain in an ass it is every day, every week, every weekend, getting bombarded by agents, going to opens, dragging the kids all across Sydney or wherever they may be in this lovely country of ours. They've missed out on a few properties. They've spent money on building, pests, legals. Sometimes we've got clients that come to us, 6 months, 12 months down the track, they're thousands of dollars out of pocket, let alone opportunity cost in terms of time with families, friends, loved ones, or worse still, there was properties that sold within their budget that they should have bought 6 months ago that are now out of their budget. So we've got to move to a plan B. So look, in terms of a lot of clients, especially the legal profession, a lot of them inherently, they're in the business of giving advice. So they're actually quite good candidates for a buyer's agent service. But people that are time poor, people that are looking for guidance, as I said earlier, looking to de-risk the process. A big part of employing a buyer's agent, wherever you are in the country as well, part of that fee is you are paying for their relationships with agents.
Yes.
And it's really, really important. And I think in all industries, if you have tighter relationships with people, the treatment you get is sometimes more favorable than others. So that's equally a really, really important part of it. A lot of people talk about off-market listings. As you know, and your team know well, we do buy a lot of off-market property, but sometimes that's not all it's cracked up to be as well. If they're wanting $2 million for an off-market property that probably is only worth 1.7 to 1.8, that's potentially not the best acquisition for a client. But equally, if they're wanting 1.8 and you think it's probably worth that, and you've got some really sound evidence to justify that, absolutely, that's a different story. So I think depending on the individual, different reasons, different drivers. But obviously, you're not going to employ anyone in any profession, whatever it is, if you don't see value and feel you're getting a return on that investment.
It's such a good point. And I say to my legal professionals, I usually find that my clients who are either upgrading or have a little bit of extra money set aside, and you're either a busy barrister, special counsel, or partner, you really find the value because you've only got, with a 3-month pre-approval, 12 weekends really to find something. And not all 12 weekends you're going to go and look at property. So let's say you look at 6 of them over the 12. Are you actually seeing the properties, or are you just scrolling through Domain? And it can get disheartening when you go to these open homes, and we've talked about this before, and there's this weird market, and we'll talk about where the market is right now, but because there's no stock, it's this artificial sense of competition, because all the same people are coming to the same places because there's just not much out there.
Yeah. Yeah, look, that's right. Look, I guess to the first point, you're right. In terms of busy family professionals, individual, and case in point, I just had a lovely young family in here over the weekend, and we're really trying to refine their brief. And we showed a number of recent sales in the suburbs they're looking at. And ironically, a couple of these properties would have been great fits for them, ones they should have bought. However, they were out of Sydney that weekend at a wedding, didn't get time to see it.
Yes.
It's not just off-market properties. There's a lot of properties that are right under people's sort of noses that, for time, conflicting priorities, or maybe they're just looking in slightly the wrong area, they're actually missing. And I think that's a big part of a buyer's agent role, to guide and steer them into the right area so they're not missing those opportunities, or at least they're being given maximum exposure to the market. And as you said, when you do turn up on a Saturday and see 40 or 50 other people there, that can be pretty overwhelming as well. And it's actually hard to assess a home when there's so many
Of
people.
course.
The
Of course.
light, acoustics, the thermal qualities. How does the loud actually feel? If you're shoulder to shoulder, sort of like you're on a dance floor, it's pretty hard to actually figure out how a place feels.
No, and case in point, myself, I'll share this anecdote. Mr. John Carew and his fine team, Francesca, as well, helped secure myself and my wife's property back in 2020. It was a very strange time, I must say. The market, everyone thought the market was going to tank. COVID happened. It was like in that weird middle period in October 2020 within COVID. And John and his team found this property in French's Forest that we never would have been able to know about because it wasn't on market. It was a strange situation that they didn't want to have many people through the property because their elderly grandmother was sick. And John had a great relationship with the agent. So we were able to get the property below market with basically little to no competition, if I remember there, John. So it was very helpful and very helpful in that regard. And initially my wife said, we don't need a buyer's agent, but after we engaged you, she said, I don't know what we would have done without you.
Yeah, well, no, it's very kind of you to say. And look, obviously, I think for most people that bought in 2020, they've done incredibly well, which is great. So it's obviously great for you and Emmy as well. And it's always a privilege, any client that appoints you, because generally when you're working with someone, for instance, yourselves, it's a key life event. They're sort of, starting, out, first home, maybe they're getting a larger home for a family. It's generally at a really important and critical time of their life. So it is a real privilege doing what we do and get to see the I guess the inner dynamics of people's relationships. It's a high level of trust.
Yes.
And you're right in terms of the value, and it's good for people to know that the vast majority of buyers agents out there, the level of expenditure or investment you put down with them up front as a retainer or an engagement fee should be relatively small. The balance of the fee shouldn't be payable until you've actually done the job for them. So that's something for people to be aware of as well. You don't have to pay the whole amount up front. And really the idea is that, the buyer's agent shouldn't be, winning until the client has won. And that's certainly how we've structured it in our business. And I guess that's why a way of saying, look, if a client's prepared to back us or back a good independent buyer's agent in any city in this great country, it's really is sort of a partnership together.
It's a good point you make. And as George Orwell said, not all buyers, agents, and brokers are created equal. Some are more equal than others. Just as how we're in the top 100 out of 19,000 brokers, and there's new brokers joining every day. As I understand it, there's this course that someone can do to become a buyer's agent, get in through Queensland, and then get transferred over to New South Wales, South Australia, and Western Australia, and all that stuff. It seems like there's a glut of not mediocre professionals by any means, but new buyers agents. So it's good to know the difference.
Yeah, it is. Look, certainly in the time I've been in the industry, sort of almost a decade now, the popularity and prevalence, if you like, of buyers agents has certainly increased. Look, I think for the industry as a whole, that's a really good thing. Roughly, my understanding is there's circa 75,000 sales agents in the country. And there's roughly 3,000 buyers agents. So, there's still a long way to go in terms of parity there.
Yes.
But look, as an industry, I think the buyers agent industry still does have a lot of maturing to do. And look, you're right, in terms of real estate, and this is not just for buyers agents, but sellers agents, in terms of what we do and the service and what we're actually advising people on, the barriers to entry are still relatively low. So it is important for consumers to do their research when appointing someone. It's potentially millions of dollars on the line, and it's your life. It's your family, nest egg, or maybe the biggest investment you're ever going to make. So it is important. And, I think education, I know the Real Estate Institute of New South Wales and the Buyers Agent Institute as well, REBA are doing sort of work around this in terms of increasing the professional standards. And I think, long term, that's a really good thing. There you are, mate.
Sounds like there's a bit of technical difficulties. We're back. We're back. We always roll through it there, John. And I'm endeared by everything you're saying that I can hear through our friends Telstra that always do a great job. Shout out to Telstra. Actually, my father-in-law will
They
help that.
do.
He works at Optus. So, yeah. But I want to talk about, because everyone's tuning in now, I would say it is now 1:17 Australian Eastern Standard Time. If you have any questions for this behemoth, juggernaut, legend of property, put them in the comments now, because it's very rare that we get this man away from the properties and wheeling and dealing. DK says, great work, keep it up. And Moses says, this is a great show. So we've already got some people joining in. I want to switch gears and a little bit. And the title that we've called this, John, is Now the Time. I'd love to ask you, what are you seeing in the market? And is now the time to buy in property? I get this question literally day in and day out.
Should I wait for the bottom or should I buy now?
That's just a generic person, no one in particular.
Yes, we get asked that daily and weekly as well. So it's really hard to say. You know, like I look at some of the properties we were purchasing a decade ago, and the growth in them has been phenomenal. Some of them have, you know, doubled or even a little bit more in some cases. So it's always hard to say in terms of picking the bottom of the market. When, you know, personally as a business, not big proponents of that. We sort of really more advise people to say, look, if you're mentally ready to buy, you know, if it makes sense for your life and your circumstances, if you've got a buffer, a financial buffer, you know, which obviously you and your team are very close to the inner workings of that, and you feel like you're ready to go, well, that's the right time. I think if you're buying for a period of, you know, 5 to 10 years plus, which you really should be as a home buyer with the in and out costs, if you're only planning on buying for a couple of years and getting in and out of the market, you're verging on gambling. You may get lucky, but you may get unlucky as well. So I think if you're buying for the right reasons with the right motivation and you're buying for the long term, you know, you really do it when it suits your lifestyle. And this is, I think, something the media probably forgets sometimes. You know, God love our media friends. However, you know, buying your family home is not sort of, you know, investing in BHP shares or CBA shares or something in yourself, you know, some exotic sort of private equity investment in your super fund. Buying for lifestyle reasons, you know, and if you've got, you know, a couple of babies on the way, or, you know, maybe it's an elderly couple that have a health issue and need to downsize from the 1,000 square meter block they're on, you know, the market, you know, is somewhat irrelevant, you know, so you do it when you're ready. And I think if you hold for the long term, hold through the cycle, time will generally be your friend.
So time in the market, not time in the market. Is that the message we want to walk away with here, John?
I would say so. Yeah, absolutely. You know, because I think there's always a bunch of people that's saying the market's going to crash. There's obviously some people on the other side as well. But if you look at, you know, 120 odd years of data on certainly Sydney real estate and then nationally, January time's been your friend. So that's what we advise people.
Good point. Good point. And if you are thinking of getting into the market, can I just stress the importance? Get your pre-approval sorted beforehand. There's nothing worse than negotiating. And then they say, oh, are you ready to do business? Oh, let me check to my bank or broker. That just puts you from the top of the list right down to the bottom of the list, because and you can talk to that as well.
Well, it's so important. And certainly from a buyer's agent point of view, you know, we can't really be employed or engaged until a pre-approval is in place, because the last thing you want to do, as you said, is hustle, you know, with agents, find an awesome property, whether it's on market, off market, and then you can't act on it. That's really frustrating, and it's frustrating for the buyer's agent, the seller's agent, and the buyer. So definitely having a really good, sound financial base, having a pre-approval in place, and knowing exactly what your numbers are, making sure you've taken into account, you know, stamp duty, these sort of things. You've got to know the whole picture, you know, because as you said, sometimes, especially the Sydney market and you know, Brisbane, Melbourne as well, they can move very quickly, you know, so you need to be able to pull the trigger if you've got a really good opportunity.
You're hitting the nail on the head there, John. With the rate rises as well, we've had 12 months of 11 rate rises, and our dear friends at the bank have just increased the rates again out of step with the RBA. It's over 300,000 in borrowing power impacted. That's 300 on average. So if you had a pre-approval 12 months ago, can I just tell you, it's very different to today. So if you need to brush it up, get it in place. It's complimentary. Most brokers don't charge a fee for their service, so definitely get in contact. I want to talk about, because we talked about stamp duty, that a lot of our some of our legal clients, we have this great product that we talk about all the time, the 90%, 10% no LMI product. And sometimes it's a bit of a misnomer that stamp duty doesn't have to be paid for. I just want to say for the record, stamp duty does have to be paid for. But the government, God bless them, just came out of the woodwork recently and said they're going to scrap the annual land tax option that they proposed under Dominic Perrottet. Wanted to get your thoughts on if that's a hindrance to the market or it's going to be accepted in place of this new policy where they're going to waive stamp duty up to 800,000, where it's at 650 right now in New South Wales.
Yeah, that's right. Well, look, I guess in terms of our business, we're predominantly, in the inner suburbs of, Sydney, as you know. So I think, look, certainly that $1.5 million land tax change that was introduced sort of on 1 January, that has set a bit of a fire in that sort of 1 to 1.5 segment. So if you think sort of 2-bedroom terraces, in the inner west, or a 2-bedroom apartments on the lower North Shore, or sort of those areas, it's really put a bit of a rocket under those markets because, as you know, for a lot of people entering the market, that the buffer is not there, or the challenge rather is not their serviceability, it's their equity position.
It is.
So that enabled them to have a bigger deposit, throw the stamp duty at the deposit, and leverage harder. So, I believe, and reading the media this week, that is highly likely to be repealed from the 30th of June or 1st of July onwards. I think they've got the support of the Greens and maybe an independent crossbencher as well. So what that will do to the Sydney market, it might just sort of cause that $1 to $1.5 million market for first home buyers just to settle down a bit. I would expect it would. It'll probably cause there to be quite a big rush over the next 5 weeks on it, because I can imagine some of those potential buyers out there, their pre-approval may go from 1.4 to 1.2 based on this change, because it's going to suck out such a big equity position from them. And yeah, in terms of the sub 800, in terms of inner Sydney or Sydney as a whole, really, there's not a huge amount that trades under that level, which is scary to say now. So I think certainly in regional areas, and I believe it's a sliding scale from 800,000 to 1 million. I think that would really help those areas, that change.
Me too.
Sort of coastal towns and Newcastles, etc. So I think that will, that'll probably be a positive for their market. But yeah, it really has set a fire in that 1 to 1.5 million mark in Sydney here.
One of the most expensive cities in the world, next to London and Singapore. Aren't we very lucky there, John, to be living here?
Indeed.
Now, I want to talk about this. I usually ask and maybe have a bit of a clickbait, where should you buy? But what's your favorite property type and area, if I may be so bold?
That's a really good question. I guess it's hard to sort of really, nail that down to a singular type if I can, because I think what you find, everyone's journey is different. And Sydney in particular, it's quite tribal, Sydney, in terms of where people live, work, and operate. People that sort of, a lot of my schoolmates are in the Shire in southern Sydney. They don't really like leaving that area. Our good friends on the northern beaches are a little bit the same. And I think
the Insular Peninsula, the Balgala area.
Yeah, so I think once you get in a part of Sydney, a lot of people, really like to stay there. Obviously, there's, you've got a lot of people, for instance, now selling larger homes on the North Shore. They're moving to the beaches, but equally a lot of them are coming into the inner city, inner west, into smaller apartments or warehouse conversions or terraces. So I think, there's no best option. I think for every buyer is different, and part of the art in guiding buyers is sort of trying to figure out that right combination of them, of home, of size, of condition, of how big's the backyard, how far is it from mum and dad's, where are your buddies, where's work, where's preschool, where's school, and trying to sort of really figure out that right sweet spot for them. Because as we just said, with all the stamp duty piece, it's so expensive to get in and out of a property, somewhere between 8 and 9% by the time you add up stamp duty, legal fees, buyer's agent fees, seller's agent fees. So you want to get it right. And if you spread those costs out over 10 years plus, they don't sound too bad. But that I think that's a big part of a buyer's agent role, is to de-risk it and not have you buying a home that in 6 months you're thinking, what did I do here?
No.
You should be thinking, wow, I love this home. It's awesome. And I can see myself sort of, growing and enjoying life here for many years to come.
And I think you hit the nail on the head before with that entering and exiting. It's a very expensive process. It's not like selling a share, which is, I don't know, $20 on CBA.
That's
That
right.
stamp duty piece is, 40 to 50,000 if you're buying at that elite level plus.
Yeah.
So if you're changing every 2 to 3 years, that might be a proposal for the rent vesting strategy. If you're going to be changing every 2 to 3
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, it's too much transaction cost to be constantly getting in and out, let alone emotional and other costs in terms of your family, especially if you've got kids involved or, spouses, all those sort of things. So it's certainly, property is a long-term game, in our humble opinion.
Absolutely. And obviously, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. And even wait a little bit longer with a build a bit more savings, and maybe instead of a townhouse, get the house. Instead of an apartment, get the townhouse. Time is on your side, as you said. There's no wasted opportunities there. I want to talk about what are clients asking for in the current market at the moment there, John, as a general rule. When they're coming to you, what are the briefs that you're seeing?
Yeah. Look, the big frustration for buyers at the moment, in terms of frustration, is just the lack of stock on the market. So I believe this is fairly national from data I've seen, but in Sydney, a lot of the sort of the core markets, whether it's in the inner west or the lower North Shore or the northern beaches, they're off to sort of close to 50% in terms of what they would normally be volume-wise. So buyers are simply starved for options. And when they do see a half decent option, every sort of Tom, Dick, and Harry is all over it, and some of the prices being achieved are actually, really sort of rebounding quite aggressively in Sydney here. So I think that's the biggest frustration for buyers at the moment. So that's in terms of finding it. Then buying it is just as hard as it ever has been because of this lack of supply. Agents are, doing a really good job in terms of building competition and momentum in their properties, and actually nailing that property is really, really difficult. So that's the biggest frustration. In terms of what sort of buyers we're seeing, if I'm to say the sort of top probably two groups in particular would be busy professional families.
Yes.
Either with or without children, or maybe family planning, but that's sort of a really, really the most common client type for us, actually. But probably one that's really emerging, and there's been a bit of a talk about this in the media, is really the downsizer market. All of those baby boomers born, 60, 65, 70, 75 years ago, coming out of these larger family homes, where the kids have grown up, left, whether or not they're here or abroad, and the maintenance, etc., is getting too much, and they want to actually enjoy life more and not be constantly gardening, doing the pool, emptying the gutters, all these sort of things. So I think the downsizer market is a bit of a sort of awakening giant at the moment. Ironically, though, there's still a lot of these downsizers sitting on very large homes because they're reluctant to sell because they're not sure where they're going to go. So that's
Good point.
there's a bit of a bottleneck, and because no one's selling, there's nothing to buy, and it's a bit of a Mexican standoff, if you like. So that's feeding into the supply restrictions, and I think you're probably seeing that, right across the country in all the key markets as well.
And when people see properties on Domain, I heard a analogy recently that Domain is kind of like the Tinder, like you're just seeing the surface, basically. Is that true? What you're seeing as Domain is just like maybe the tip of the iceberg?
Look, it's probably more than the tip of the iceberg. It's really hard to get data in terms of what percentage of properties as a whole trade off market, because obviously they're not captured by any one portal, if you like, because Domain and real estate generally don't have visibility of them, but certainly in the more sophisticated markets, in Sydney, the prevalence of off-market selling has been steadily growing over the past decade or more. As I said, there's some pros and cons with that approach, and every campaign, whether it's on market or off market, slightly different, but certainly a good independent buyer's agent with whatever city they may be operating out of should have some really good agent relationships, and as part of that should be able to be giving buyers a heads up in terms of potential options that could be coming to market, off market opportunities or the like, just to sort of essentially increase their chances of finding the right ones. And I think if you look at most buyers agents businesses, they will buy a portion, a decent percentage of properties off market or pre-market, as well as obviously on market opportunities too. But again, there's no cheapest or best way to buy. People ask me this all the time. Oh, John, I know I'm going to get a bit better deal if I buy before auction, or if I buy at auction, or if I buy off market, or if I wait till it's passed in and I buy it a few weeks later. There's no best way to buy. And really what you need, and this is where it's hard for an individual coming into the market once every 10 to 15 years, they don't have that confidence in terms of knowledge in the market they're looking at, or the agents, the negotiation, the families on the line. There's so much pressure. So that's where I think if you can sit back, assess, how does this agent operate? What's the property actually worth? Where does the value stack up against the price guide? What's competing? How's the agent going with this property? And then you can sort of figure out what's your best strategy. Doesn't mean you always get them, certainly not. Because there will be many cases where other buyers will just go to levels where we don't see value, and that's okay. We move on and we find something else. But yeah, it's really confusing for buyers out there a lot of the time. I bet.
And I think it can be incredibly frustrating as well to know that their time is limited in terms of their pre-approval, and they're just, getting either gazumped, or there's just too many people, or the agents, as you've seen at the moment, they're putting these low price guides, which is kind of a gray area, just to get people in the door.
Yes.
And you end up with 30 people on the day, or 30 groups, even more. And I think, it must be very disheartening.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and we've heard groups of even up to 100 at open homes recently in Sydney. So crowd control is back.
Yes.
Cheek sometimes say to the agents, you're going to need to start employing some security guards at opens just to manage it. But look, the issue of underquoting has been around for a long time. I know in New South Wales and other jurisdictions they've introduced legislation to try and somewhat reduce its prevalence, but it's still ripe. And there's the old saying, price it low and watch it go. And that essentially, as you said, is designed to get people in, build momentum and push things up. And that's what's really frustrating for buyers, especially if you've given up a couple of Saturdays, you've spent money with your solicitor, you've paid a few $100 to get the building and pest inspection, and you think you're within a chance, and you're just not. You're never going to be in the game. And again, a good independent buyer's agent, should be able to give you some better guidance around what likely is the fair value of that property, and sort of, still pay somewhat attention to the price guide, but really what's it's worth and why, and have some evidence around it. And I'd encourage any buyers that are looking, when they're speaking to agents, say, look, awesome that your price guide is X, but what do you think are the best 2 or 3 recent comparable sales and why?
Good point.
Good point. What they say. For instance, what did the last one sell for on the street? What did the neighbours sell? I saw that sold for 6 months ago. If the neighbour's home is very similar and sold for $2 million, a few months ago, and they're guiding 1.6, chances are they're probably a little bit light on the guide. So, these are the questions that buyers should be asking. Get out there and ask as much information as you can.
Of course. And Miuru, one of my dear legal colleagues and friends, is saying, thanks, great work. So well done, John. Before we close up, mate, I want to ask you this question. What are 3 things you'd like people to walk away with before they sign off today?
3 things for people to walk away. I think, look, obviously when you're, if you are looking to, buy a property, in the short to medium term, I think the first thing would be, get a plan together. That starts, with your mortgage broker, with your finances, really sitting down and assessing your plan, because until you've got that plan, there's not too much you can do. So I'm really a big believer in getting a plan. I think that the second thing is, in that plan, think long term. I think a lot of buyers sort of, think sort of really short term, and as you said, end up chopping and changing a lot, or just wasting months and months. So think about, okay, what do I need out of a home? Not just today, but what am I likely to need in sort of, 5 years plus? And that generally puts you in a better frame of mind, and as part of that, do your research as well, get out there. And I think the last thing is, it's really important for buyers to do their due diligence. A lot of buyers go from see house to buy house, which, sometimes is okay, but it's fraught with danger. So, like making sure that, you've got your pre-approval in place and your finances are sound, making sure you engage a fantastic property lawyer that can, ensure that contract is favorable and there's no sort of sticky clauses in there for you. Making sure you've done a building and pest, so you know exactly what you're getting. And if there is some repairs and maintenance, which invariably there is, you know what you're going to be up for. And just doing some basic checks, is there a tunnel going underneath? What's the zoning of the street behind? Are you going to get apartments come up? So that'd be my things. Get a plan, think long term, and do your due diligence.
John, as always, this chat has been replete with nuggets, my friend. I would encourage people to reach out to you. Where are you hanging out most, my friend?
Most of the time, we'll be here at Mayfield HQ in Ferry Street, Hunters Hill, and always happy to take a call or have a chat, as you know, Cullen.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think Ghazal Ghulam Hussain saying, great work, Cullen and John. So thank you there, Ghazal. That's very kind of you. Really appreciate all your insights there, sir. We'll try and upload this. We're going to put the Lawyer Lending Live podcast uploaded to Apple and Spotify very soon. So yours will be episode number 19. Thank you for joining us today, my friend. It's been fantastic.
Thank you for having me, Cullen. Thanks again.
My pleasure, everyone, and hope all is well. Take care. Have a happy Wednesday, everyone.